Welcome to Off Air with Christy Capel. Oh, this is going to be good. We're going to get educated. We are with a nutritionist, one of my favorite people, Kristin Kirkpatrick. She is an award-winning dietitian and best-selling author. The Huffington Post, by the way, named Kristin one of 35 diet and nutrition experts you need to follow on Twitter. She has appeared on national shows such as Today Show, NBC Nightly News, Fox Business, Dr. Oz, so many more. But I will have to say that she kind of got her start with Fox 8 News in the morning in Cleveland.
Totally.
Yes, totally. She can't forget us little people. And by the way, she does contribute. She writes some fabulous articles for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Time, Oprah, Martha Stewart Living. And if I sat here and named everything, we would be here for 30 minutes with her intro. It is so good to see you.
Oh my gosh, it's such an honor, such a privilege. And let me just tell you, Fox 8 News is like not the little people in my world, that's the big people. So
okay. So as long as you remembered us, Kristin and I had so many fun segments.
Yes,
oh my God. We just laughed but they were always very educational, and we obviously learned about nutrition, and then she'd cook and then she moved off to Denver. How's Denver?
Denver's good. It's no Cleveland. It's a different place. There's some great things about it, but I got to tell you, like, I feel like I'm not getting the same vibe when I'm watching the Cavs in the playoffs. Like, I'm going nuts, and people around me are like, what's wrong with that girl, right?
What's wrong with the Denver teams? Listen, do you have family still left in Cleveland?
My mom and dad moved to Denver about 2 years ago. So
they were here for a while.
So they were there in Cleveland, and then they decided to move here.
Oh my gosh! And the last time I saw Kristin, we were just chatting before we went live. That her son was what, two and a half, and now he's almost 9.
And my oldest was 5, and now I'm 11 and a half and 8 and a half.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
thanks. I know, things are crazy. And now she goes, and Kendall, she was like 2. I'm like, she's like 10 going on 18. So
yeah, she was like a nugget. Kendall was
yeah. Oh my gosh, I know it. Time flies. But Kristin has done so many amazing things, and I wanted to get her on my podcast because I think there's so many health things out there, or nutrition things, or there's always a fad going on. Every time I click on TikTok, there's all these like, here's the new diet, or here's the new this. And I'm like, is any of that really real? And then people who get on, I don't know if they're AI. I don't know if they're real nutritionists, Kristin, that telling me that, breaking these myths that they're okay. So we'll get to some of that. But I want to first talk about making peace with food. I think a lot of us, as I had mentioned, the diet and the weight and things that we're seeing on social media, rejecting the culture basically of that. And so kind of break that down and how we can be okay with what we're eating.
Right. So I think this is so important because, I've been at Cleveland Clinic and a dietitian for 20 years. And within that 20-year period, I rarely have met someone who has come in and just said, I'm just going to try and eat a little bit better, and I'm going to give myself a break if that doesn't always happen. It's usually the opposite. It's usually someone who says, can you put me on this diet or this diet? There's an assignment of diet. And I think that word diet is what keeps us, what puts the wall up from allowing us to be able to meet the goals that we want to meet. So I like to, number one, if you're going to make peace with food, let's not use the word diet. Let's use the word dietary patterns.
Okay.
Because dietary pattern could be different for you, Christy, than it is for me. And you and I have very different genetics and family history. So our goals are going to be very different. And I think like part of making peace with food is the understanding that you can pick pieces and parts that you like from different dietary patterns and make it your own. We have studies showing that if you don't embrace your personal, your cultural, and your religious preferences, then you will never stay on a diet long term. So we have to look at that as well. I've had patients that come in and it's like, there's 2 things that people say a lot. Number 1, you're going to make me eat kale. And number 2, please don't take away bacon.
Oh, geez.
And so that's a great example of diet culture because it's someone thinking that I, as a dietitian, are going to make that person eat kale. Well, guess what? Kale's a cruciferous vegetable. There's a million other ones that we can choose from and a lot of different nutrient density in all of them. If you don't like kale, you'll never stick with it. And same's true for the bacon. If you love bacon, then have bacon every once in a while and don't feel shameful about it, because it's not the things we have every once in a while that will impact our health. It's the things we have frequently.
Yeah.
So bacon's not in that category, you're fine. And that's kind of how we start the process and conversation of let's make some peace with food and what it looks like for us.
My husband and I call it cheat days. So if we want to have bacon, or if I'm strict diet, quote unquote, throughout the week, then maybe cheat day on Saturday and Sunday. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, can that get you off track too much?
Yeah, I've never been a huge fan of just the terminology of a cheat day, because it implies that food is either good or bad, right? Because on the cheat day, it's like, well, I'm cheating, so I'm having the stuff that's not good for me. Whereas really, again, part of making peace with food could be, hey, I really love bacon, or I really love a cheeseburger every once in a while. And, one day out of the week, I'm probably going to have one, and that's going to be okay. Versus I'm going to assign a day and say, okay, this is the day that I have all the bad stuff, right? Yeah. Because again, there's a little bit of deprivation in that too, right? Even though you're allowing yourself to have it. So I think the way I like to look at it, and this is very similar to what we see in blue zones, for example, is either an 80-20 or a 90-10 approach. So for some of my patients that have been working at this for years, 90-10 is easy. For other people that are just started, 80-20 might be the way to go. So 80-20 would be 80% of the time you're going to eat nutrient dense. You're going to eat foods that actually contribute to better health. And 20% of the time, you might have the cookie, or you might have the donut, or you might have half a pizza, right? We are human, and we have to embrace that. That's never going to be perfect. And the patients that come to me and say, my diet is perfect, typically there's something really off with that. It's a little too perfect. It's a little too clean. And there's a lot of deprivation involved in that as well. So we don't have the perfect diet. It doesn't exist. But what we can find is the right pattern to reach the goals that we're trying to achieve.
And keep in mind, if you do have those goals, don't they say once you do something for 3 weeks, it sticks?
Yeah.
Is that true?
We take, once you take things away from your taste buds, sugar is a great example of that.
Yes.
It's much easier to keep that off. So I always say, and this might sound like maybe a negative way to put it, but when patients come to me, I always ask them, say, hey, tell me what your why is. And the why can't be weight. If you want to lose weight, that's fine. We'll work on that. But the why has got to be something so meaningful to you, maybe even something you don't talk about. And a lot of the whys of people that come to me are really looking into the future of what they do not want to become. Mm-hmm. And so we derive that usually from mom, dad, siblings. So we look at a disease that mom or dad got, or a sibling, Alzheimer's, dementia, early heart attack, and come to the conclusion, I don't want that to be me. Mm-hmm. I don't want that to be my future. That's a really meaningful why. So if we have the right why and we give ourselves the right amount of time, 3 weeks is a great time frame to start, we are much more likely to be able to find long-term sustainability versus a short-term fix.
Yes, that's a good point. All right, next is health span. So this is the period of enjoying good health versus lifespan, how long we live. So apparently, as I have read in Kristin's articles, there's new signs of how lifestyle impacts aging. So talk about the difference with that, because I think there's a huge difference. And that period of enjoying good health, is that what is that, middle age?
Well, I mean, I think that the point here is that if your lifespan is, let's say, 100 years, mm-hmm. but your health span is 80 years, then the last 20 years stink, right? So really what we want to achieve is not so much better lifespan, but better health span. We want to be able to live a healthy life, as healthy as possible. And then once it's time for us to exit this earth, it happens swiftly and without a whole lot of disability. That's the ideal scenario. So from a lifestyle perspective, I mean, I'm biased because I think food is probably the most important component. But if we look at the data, we know that sleep, obviously physical activity, management of stress and mental health, all of those things are really, really important. And I say that because I think we get caught up with the little things. People will say, okay, well, I only want to eat non-GMO, but then their sleep stinks. right? So if we look at the data on sleep and sleep quality, and there's so much data here, it's like, okay, well, the non-GMO component is the least of our worries right now. We got to work on the sleep.
Yes, which you think would be easy to do or implement.
Not so much. It just depends.
Not for me.
No. And it depends on where you are in life, right? I mean, for my perimenopausal, postmenopausal women, sleep is a really huge factor. And it's something that really inhibits them from being able to eat healthy. Just think about it this way. When we get into that deep REM sleep where we have this rapid eye movement, which usually happens in the latter part of the evening, closer to the morning, that's when the real deep sleep occurs. That's the time when your brain is making memories. That's the time when your brain is healing from the day. If we don't give ourselves an opportunity to get into that, we don't give our brain the possibility to heal for all of the hard stuff it did that day. So the brain works very hard when we sleep. In fact, lack of high quality sleep is a direct risk factor for dementia and Alzheimer's. So I just think when we think about health span, we can't just think about like, oh, well, I follow Mediterranean diet, so I'm good. Or
I'm good till 100.
Yeah, I run marathons, so no problem here, right? It is everything. It is a combination of multiple factors that and genetics that determine a better health span.
What about the fasting aspect? People do that long fasting or short fasting, or I don't know, 8 hours or 12 hours. We've had people come on the show and talk about it. I tried it. This was years ago and I felt like I lost the weight. But you just got done talking about sleeping, and my sleeping is so crazy with working in the middle of the night. It's like, I don't know what's working and I don't know what's working and what's not. So fasting, calories, foods for the brain, talk about all of that and what's important, because I don't know, fasting seems to be a big thing.
Yeah, fasting's a big thing, and I think it's been a big thing for like the past 10 years, and I don't see it going away, despite the fact that we did have a rather large study come out a few weeks ago looking at some negative cardiometabolic aspects of time-restricted eating. So, again, that's just one study, but it's something that I think continues to be really popular. And I think one of the reasons it's popular is because it's easy. So fasting asks you to change the frequency of your eating, but doesn't necessarily ask you to change what you're eating. Mm-hmm. So I think that fasting is a good tipping point to get to healthier habits. For this reason, fasting sometimes can help kind of reset your ability to understand when you're hungry and when you're full. Mm-hmm. And that's a really tough thing for people to do, right? I mean, think about, and I'm not just saying for you, but I'm saying all your listeners, I think about this for me. When you sit down and eat something, what are the motivational reasons for doing it? My argument would be half the time, it's not hunger. It's boredom, or it happens to be 2:00 and that's when I have my snack, or I'm just kind of waiting here in car line and, oh my gosh, there's these nuts here next to me. I'm just going to start eating them. So I think we lose this ability to really tap into our hunger and fullness cues to know, okay, I'm going to eat when my body gives me the signal to fuel, and I'm going to stop eating when I no longer feel hungry. Not when I no longer feel hungry. So fasting sometimes can help with that because it's forcing us to kind of get a little bit uncomfortable with that aspect. I would say from a fasting perspective, it just depends on what works for you. So you can't get into autophagy unless you're fasting for 3 days. That can be really challenging. From a general fasting perspective, there's this argument that we are surrounded by food every step of the way. We leave the house, we pass all this fast food, we're always near food. So we're living in a very different society than our ancestors did, where they, if we think about cavemen, they were forced to probably go days without eating, and then they had a huge meal.
Can you imagine how hangry they were?
So hangry, but they were probably used to it.
Exactly.
Used to it. So maybe they weren't so hangry, but it probably helped with hunting because that's where their food source was, right?
Yeah, right.
But I just think, obviously we're not in caveman era anymore, but the purpose of the conversation is really to look at the fact that we need to recognize that food is ingrained in every single aspect of our life. When we get in the car, when we meet someone socially, when we go you can't go to a coffee shop now and just get a coffee. you're surrounded by all these foods.
Croissants.
Right? The croissants and the cake pops. And so there's always this encouragement to eat. And if we go kind of back to the basics, we really are not meant to eat throughout the entire day.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Great point. My idea for this next part was to do like a social media mythbuster quiz, like what's trending. Okay, so we are all on social media, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and it's got all these ideas. And is it a myth? Is it not? So I asked Kristin, I'm like, can you break down some of the stuff that I'm seeing? First of all, the carnivore diet.
Yes.
Biggest question. Also with that, do you need supplements with it? Is it healthy?
Well, so the carnivore diet has really been trending lately for a few reasons. I think number one, there is nutrient density for sure with animal proteins.
Yeah.
So there's nutrient density there. If you're on the carnivore diet, you are literally forced not to consume any ultra processed foods. So people would probably argue that, okay, if I'm not having ultra processed foods, then that's a good plus. But really this boils down to, again, how much are you actually consuming? If all you're consuming is meat, and you have very little plants in your diet, the nutrient density in the meat will probably not offset the lack of nutrients you're getting from fruits and vegetables. And as we know, with your question, do we need to supplement?
Yeah.
It depends on the supplement, but many supplements can never match what food can do.
True.
So it's kind of a tricky one as far as the trend is concerned. And I would argue that the people that have tried it, that have spoken with me, they like love it for the first few weeks. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I would just love to have a piece of bread.
See one more piece of steak.
Right. So I think the sustainability is probably the biggest issue with it, that it's probably not sustainable long term.
No, but they're saying like no belly fat, no brain fog, gives you unlimited energy. I mean, really?
Well, that would be something interesting to see in the data, which lacking with the carnivore diet. So that's the thing, really, from an evidence-based approach. When I hear people say like, oh, well, this is all the great stuff about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Can you send me the study? Because I can't find it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find the study that you're referencing here. Oh no, it's not a study. It's just, everyone's talking about it. So I think like we need studies. It would be interesting. I'm not sure if anyone's going to invest in doing a study on that, but if they did, be really interesting. But again, the short-term data is not what's useful. It's the long-term data. Mm-hmm. So if you're someone for over a decade on the carnivore diet, good luck with that. And then let's see what their numbers are. If you're on a carnivore diet and you're not having carbohydrates, very similar to keto, most likely you're going to lose weight. So the question is it a chicken or an egg approach? If you lose weight, you will lose weight overall, including the belly. That's number one. And then number two, if you had blood sugar problems, if you had lipid problems, those numbers are probably going to normalize simply because weight came down. So the question is,
Well, what happens with the sustainability? Then we stop the carnivore diet and then it all
comes back.
Yeah. So I'm hearing about this colostrum supplementation. What is going on?
So just as a reminder to the listeners and all the men.
Yes. We're going to get real right now.
So colostrum is referred to as the first milk. So when a baby is born and a woman breastfeeds, it literally is the first milk that the baby gets before the milk after that, the normal breastfeeding milk, comes in. So what we know from colostrum is that it really helps with immune function. It's super high in nutrient density. So it's no surprise that someone somewhere said, well, man, let's take this and package it into a pill. And now it's trending a little bit for adults, by the way. So again, I would go back to the data. When you look at something like this, and it can come in a pill or a powder, this is what I've seen.
Okay.
Do we really have data outside of the anecdotal that this is going to do something in a pill or powder form similar to what we see in a newborn child utilizing breast milk? that comparison study, again, might be in progress, but we haven't seen it. We haven't seen published data on that. So again, I think until we see published data, I probably wouldn't waste the money on that. I would take that money and put it into just buying more fruits and vegetables. That's probably going to do you better than the colostrum.
I know it, but everybody wants to do what's trending. So the whole bodybuilders who drink breast milk, you've heard that.
I've heard that.
Oh, yeah. So that works for them, or I guess it's just.
I don't know. I mean, if we think of bodybuilding and we think of protein, getting enough, protein, getting creatine, there's a lot of interesting studies on creatine. I think like looking at that from a bodybuilding perspective, there could be some benefit. We definitely have a lot of data. We don't have the data on, we're going to follow bodybuilders for 10 years that consume breast milk and see if they have better muscle mass than individuals that don't. And that's the type of data we need to be able to make these claims.
Natural alternatives for GLP-1. So talk about what that stands for and then how it helps reduce weight.
Yeah, so GLP-1 agonist drugs are Ozempic, Wegovy. Those are the drugs that we know. I mean, talk about trending. That's probably the number one trend, right?
Wow, the Ozempic. I think I've had a story daily for months.
Of course. And, it's so interesting, just again, being in this field for over 20 years. I mean, I really do see these drugs as game changers. The challenge I have and the question I have is when you get on some of these drugs, are you on them for life?
Yeah.
Or do you have the opportunity without gaining significant weight to lower the dose and stay on it or get off of it completely? So I'd like to see.
And what are the side effects?
Right. Well, I mean, the people that I've worked with, and I have firsthand working with patients that are on Ozempic, many of them will say, oh my gosh, Kristin, I feel great. I lost all the weight. My numbers are great. I don't need to be on this anymore. And they get off the drug and I mean, rapidly, they gain weight, right? So all those things that Ozempic did for them, taking away the cravings, delaying gastric emptying so they feel much fuller, quicker, all those things go away. So again, like while we're on these drugs, we also need to be working with a dietitian or a physician to make sure our diet is such that we're not losing too much muscle mass, because that's one of the main reasons why people will pile it back on, and that we're getting nutritional bang with every bite because you're eating so much less. So you can't afford to sit there with a bag of licorice.
Right.
It's probably like, you're going to be like, man, I'm stuffed. Maybe I'll eat again tonight. And you got no nutrient density, but they're expensive. So for patients that do not have this covered by insurance and they don't have the funds, what is trending now is like alternatives. So berberine, which is a supplement that might help with, making you fuller longer and all of those things. Ozempic was another one where people would say, oh, I just had these overnight oats every day and losing all this weight. The mechanisms are not the same. Okay. We definitely know that. There's a lot of data on GLP-1 agonist drugs. In fact, when I checked 2 days ago on the clinical trials website for the government, I think there's 130 trials right now going on. So there's a lot of studies that will be published on this. I'm not sure if any of them will look at these supplements and things like that. But the point here is that if you think about a GLP-1 agonist drug, that is something that's going to be regulated by the FDA versus a supplement that is not regulated. Really, a lot of times don't really know what we're getting because we don't have to be made to know. Consumers by law can be really left in the dark on a lot of processes with that. So I would say
everybody wants that fast weight loss. So
everyone wants the fast weight loss, right? So I would say, again, it's not sexy by any means, but working with someone who can really take a baby steps approach is probably the best approach that you can look at.
Gluten is bad for health.
Yes. It's not bad for health with the majority of the population. I always say there's like articles that I write sometimes that when I take it to like my editor at the Today Show, I'll always say, well, this is another one that's unpopular, but scientifically accurate. So popularity versus accuracy. So gluten, we know that if you're someone who is non-celiac gluten sensitive, so you definitely have a sensitivity to gluten, your HLA genes are being triggered in such a way that inflammatory factors could occur, disease, etc. All of those things are accurate. And then, of course, we have people with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition. When they have gluten, it flattens the villi in their small intestine, which means they can't absorb any nutrients. Okay, so that's bad too. So let's take these two populations and put them off to the side. Now, let's say you're someone who doesn't have celiac disease and also does not have a non-celiac gluten sensitivity diagnosis. Gluten probably is going to be fine for you.
Okay.
So that's the thing. It's kind of like two different directions. I have patients that say, I've heard you speak before. I don't care. Want to be on a gluten-free diet. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a gluten-free diet if that's your interest, but let's make sure we do it in a nutrient-dense way. What I'm trying to avoid is people going out to the store and buying a gluten-free cookie and thinking it's a better option than the regular cookie.
Right, correct.
Mm-hmm. They can tolerate gluten. So I think that's the way we have to look at it. I am all for gluten-free diets. I have patients that have rheumatoid arthritis that say, you know what, I have one autoimmune condition. I don't have celiac. I want to try a gluten-free diet. Yeah. And I'll support that. And we have some evidence that there could be some benefit there. But for the most part, to say this overlining umbrella statement that all gluten is bad for us is not accurate.
Okay. Food is stored after 8 p.m. And I also hear you're not supposed to eat past 6.
Oh, this really depends. Kristy, you're such a great example because your schedule is so whacked,
yeah.
Right? So it's just like when we hear these blanket statements of when we shouldn't eat after, it doesn't really apply to everyone. And then it makes it really confusing. I have night shift workers that are like, oh, I love everything you say. None of it applies to me. What can be done for me, right? So I think let's kind of rephrase it and think about eating more in line with our circadian rhythm. And we all have a little bit of a different circadian rhythm, even though much of it is dictated by light and dark, right? So right now we're both in the day. Our bodies are prompted to, basically stay awake. And then when it gets darker, our bodies will start saying, let's take a chill. Yeah. The reason eating late could be problematic is more in line with the digestion of food. So when we have something that's very high fiber or we have something that's very high fat, that takes the body a long time to break down, which could disrupt our ability to go to bed. So there's that aspect. But, I like to eat at least 3 hours before I go to bed. So my stomach is empty when I lie down. If my stomach is not empty, like last night we had baseball practice until 9:00 at night.
I know, right?
It was 9:30. My kids were starving. I was starving. We all ate at 10:00. We all went straight to bed.
Yes. And I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Right? That's fine. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's a different experience for our body than, let's say, Wednesday night when we didn't have any practice and we had dinner at 6 and we all went to bed around 9, right? It's a very different experience. So I think, again, if we go back to sleeping, things like that, don't try and be so restrictive, but try and think about what's going to make the most sense for me with full knowledge that not every day you can have a perfect dinner schedule.
Right. I mean, that is clearly not going to work with kids.
Yeah, you've got kids. You understand. I mean, that's
or if you don't have kids and you're just working, around the clock.
Right. Like how happy are you? You can say it, Kristy, when you look outside and there's practices and it's raining and you're like.
I'm not going to lie. I just asked our meteorologist this morning. I'm like, so are there going to be soccer games this weekend? He's like, what's the right answer? I'm like, please say no.
Yeah. I was watching an Instagram reel the other day. I was just laughing so hard. And it was a mom. And it was like that feeling for a soccer mom when you wake up at 6 a.m. and hear the rain outside, right? And she looks outside and then she closes her eyes back, puts her eye mask back on.
It's the best. I will not let my kids watch this episode, but yes, it's so true. Oh, geez. Oh, gosh. I just got the text from the baseball coach. How disappointing.
Oh, geez, that's so sad.
All right. Everybody start dusting and vacuuming. No. And then my last myth, apparently I saw on the social media, your body needs a cleanse to eliminate toxins.
This is my favorite one to talk about, probably because one of my expertise is liver. Our liver is given to us at birth. It is our detoxifier. It's amazing. It's incredible. It does so much for us. We don't need a cleanse to help the liver do its job. We need to eat healthy. We need to not abuse alcohol. All of those things help the liver to do its job, not a cleanse. We have zero evidence. We don't have studies showing that a cleanse is something that can help our liver. In fact, some cleanses can actually be dangerous and lead to electrolyte imbalances. So again, this is just, we could put all of this in one bucket of, this is the quick fix approach that I want to do because I don't actually want to change my diet long term. It takes a long time to change habits, and it takes time for the body to recognize a new mode. There's no possibility to do something for 2 days once a year and all of a sudden assume that your liver is going to be great for it. This just doesn't make sense.
So no. So no. All right. And speaking of liver, that takes me into the best-selling author. She has 2 books right now, Skinny Liver and Regenerative Health. I want to first talk about skinny liver, since we were just talking about that. I was taking notes from your book. Fatty liver disease is affecting 1 in 4 people, and most of them going undiagnosed. So kind of educate us on that, and what is the latest research? You got to buy your book. Again, it's called Skinny Liver, but at least you can give us some points. And then if you're dealing with something like that or need information, read her book. It's good and educational.
So fatty liver is to be specific, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That 1 in 4 is probably pretty low. Some experts now believe it's probably 1 in 3. So fatty liver falls very much in line with insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, metabolic health. So as we see the rates of all of those things go up, rates of fatty liver go up as well, because of the role that the liver plays in management of blood sugar. So it's normal to have about 5% of fat within our liver. Once we get to 5 to 10%, we're diagnosed with fatty liver. So in the past, it was just lifestyle and diet and exercise and stress management, all these things. Now, in the past month and a half, there was a drug that was released. It is the first drug ever to be released to treat non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So now we have another option, which is great. Mm-hmm. But why is this important? I think it's important because, as I had said, the liver really takes a beating, and it takes a real big beating before it gives you any symptom. Once you get a symptom, your liver is probably in the latter stages, mid to latter stages.
And what are those symptoms?
So that could be, that could be pain in the upper right quadrant of your body. That could be fatigue. That could be, fatigue and pain are usually the first 2 symptoms.
Is there a screening for it?
Yeah. So when you go to see your physician, so your annual exam, most physicians will every year take your liver enzymes. Okay. So that's number 1. So you can see what your liver enzymes are. But number 2, if you have a high waist circumference, so for a woman, it's going to be over 35 inches, and you've got, let's say, 2 factors of metabolic syndrome. So let's just use an example. Let's say you have high triglycerides and you've got sleep apnea, or your hemoglobin A1C is high. If those things are in line and you got the liver enzymes a little elevated, you're probably going to be diagnosed with fatty liver disease. Even if the liver enzymes aren't elevated, it's probably something your doctor is going to take a look at, because they are so strongly correlated. So I think there's this stigma that people have that if they're diagnosed with this, they'll automatically say, well, I don't drink alcohol that much, so I don't get this. This has nothing to do with alcohol. Mm-hmm. That's a different condition, alcoholic fatty liver disease. This is non-alcoholic. So, I think the good news is that it grows slowly. There's a lot of time because your liver's going to keep working for a long time. But we don't always have those symptoms. So you could be harboring this for a decade before you realize it, and then you're going to really have to jump on it. So my point here is, let's jump on it now, because when you walk out into the mall tonight, 1 out of 4 people, and maybe 1 out of 3 that you pass, has it and doesn't know it probably.
And the good news is, just like anything else, if you catch it early, it's reversible.
It's completely reversible. Where it becomes not reversible is when fatty liver turns into cirrhosis. So when the entire liver is occupied by scar tissue, fibrosis, inflammation, etc., that is no longer reversible. But while we have this in a place where even when you have fibrosis, inflammation, that's the second stage. It's called NASH or MASH. Even when you get into that, even that's reversible. So there's a lot of reversing that we can do. And I always just say, like, my books, like, even though they focus on the liver, they're really about metabolic health. Yeah. So if your goal is, I want to improve my metabolic health, you're going to improve your liver. And if you want to improve your liver, you're going to improve your metabolic health. They all go hand in hand.
Okay. And then her other book, Regenerative Health, discover, as you just talked about, the metabolic type, foods to avoid, how to discover your metabolic type. Let's talk about that, foods to avoid, and then what is specifically in that book.
So that book dives much deeper into the dietary protocols. The first book was really about the disease itself and then some diet recommendations. The second book really goes into discovery of a metabolic type. And so what does that metabolic type mean? We know that fatty liver is very much dictated by waist circumference and then metabolic numbers. So we've broken it down. My co-author is a hepatologist who was at Cleveland Clinic, then Mayo, and now in private practice. We've broken it down into, okay, what's your waist circumference, and do you have any of these factors? And then from there, the entire book is really more diet mediated. So we don't like to use the word like avoid, but we do know that once you have severe, let's say you have uncontrolled type 2 diabetes and fatty liver, moderating carbohydrates can be really useful. We have plenty of data on that. So that's really kind of, we use Mediterranean diet as a base, and then we change carbohydrate content based on what your metabolic profile is.
Okay. And there are some other things within the book that I like, because she talks about how to get your kids to eat healthier snacks. So there's very good information. And can you give me one? Because right now, my 3-year-old eats great. I mean, healthy snacks. She loves her vegetables, but it's the other two. And it's like, did it take me 3 kids to finally get it to work? Or I don't know. What did I do wrong?
No, you didn't do anything wrong. I share your frustration. It's really, really quite challenging. You know, it's interesting. My kids, like, they're really like hesitant to eat anything green. So when I think of like,
just assume it's going to taste bad.
It's just assume it could be anything green, anything, right? Like, it doesn't have to be broccoli. It could be. It could be like a green apple. That's going to be gross, right? Yeah. So I think like one trick is green is great, obviously, because you get all of the chlorophyll and all the nutrients that green foods give. But if that's just like not going to happen, you could either, number one, make it a little bit more fun and add in ingredients that they like. So like, I take steamed broccoli and I'll steam it, and then I'll put it in a food processor with breadcrumbs, with Parmesan cheese, with an egg, with some cheddar cheese, and then I just bake it. And so like little tots, or like you can put in hash brown potatoes too. So now they're getting it, but they're not like, you're not saying, eat this broccoli crown. What's wrong with you? It's so delicious.
Or putting it in a blender for a smoothie.
Yeah, we're gonna repackage it in some way that might make sense for you.
Yes.
So that's kind of number one. But number two could be, focus on the things they do like. So if your kid really likes tomato sauce, that's a great example of where they can get lycopene, they can get color. And if you hide it well enough, there's a lot of great bean-based pastas out there. So you can get some really high fiber pasta with that tomato sauce. Mm-hmm. That's a win, right? Just a bowl of bean-based penne and tomato sauce, that's dinner.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't have to be this like beautiful salad. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yes. Thank you. I'm glad. And then in the pantry, you were talking about put it where they're eye level, the good snacks, or using clear containers, things like that, where they see it first.
There's a lot of science behind the sociology of why we choose to eat something. Mm-hmm. So for example, I did a reel on this the other day, where I got blueberries and blackberries. And again, like if I just had it in the package in the fridge, my kid's never going to touch it. Never. So what I do is I like wash everything. I put it in see-through containers and I put it at their eye level. And that's next to like the string cheese sticks. And so my kid will open the fridge and what does he immediately see? String cheese and then like, something else.
Yeah.
And the same is true for the pantry. So again, like if you're someone who has something in the house that you struggle with, okay, like my kids love Oreos. I'm just like full disclosure. I don't know a lot of people that don't love Oreos.
I know, right?
They're delicious. Okay. So,
good.
but my kids,
they're the worst.
They're the worst
For you.
for you, but like, they're tasty. It's hard to be like, oh, they're disgusting. I don't think they're disgusting.
Color them green. I'm joking.
So like the Oreos should be really high up in the pantry every once in a while as a snack. I don't want to see them at eye level, and I definitely don't want my kids. So putting things that when they walk in, whether it's fridge or pantry, what's the first thing they have to see and what do they have to work for to see? This is why I don't like the produce drawers in the refrigerator. Yes. Because we put our produce there and all of a sudden we're like, oh, we forgot about the produce, right? And so there's something to be said for that. So I think, kids still should be kids. Like, yeah, I wouldn't make the broccoli bites for a birthday party and put a candle on it, right? I'd have cupcakes. Yes. Or cookies or cake. Right. But like, I think one of the greatest things we can do is have them mirror what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's true for all of it. That means like having the cookie every once in a while, not being so restrictive that we're like, I can never have a cookie. Right. That's not good. And it's also not good if our diet is not nutrient dense because we're showing them, oh, you need to eat well, but we're not going to eat well. Exactly. Right? So I think our examples are the most powerful component.
And also in her book, Regenerative Health, the 5 foods shown to improve metabolic health and circling back to that. Those were interesting. And I'll name them: garlic, green tea, coffee, beans, peas, and then dark chocolate, everyone. That made the list. Yeah, so these are your go-to.
I think these are really good foods that we have plenty of evidence, a lot of studies looking at the benefit to liver and metabolic health. I'd add one more to that, and that would be extra virgin olive oil. Okay. Lots of benefit there as well. But I think these are, if you're just starting small and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not interested in doing a moderate carb diet, or I just don't want to do that yet. Even just adding some of these things to your diet can be really beneficial. I think most people become very positive by hearing about coffee. There's over a dozen studies looking at the benefit of coffee consumption to reducing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So there's a lot of bioactive compounds in coffee. We tend to look at coffee and say coffee's bad, which is why I don't like to say good or bad. But actually coffee is probably one of the greatest sources of antioxidants that we have globally. And that's probably because more people drink coffee than eat broccoli.
And that is if you don't add all the good stuff.
Yeah, don't add like the non-dairy, don't add like the, I didn't want to say the non-dairy creamer because there's some great ones, but don't add the sugary creamer. Yes. Let's just say that, right? Yeah. There's some great creamers out there that are plant-based, even half and half is going to be fine. Again, it depends on what your preference is. Mm-hmm. But let's not like offset the benefit by pouring in a whole bunch of sugar. Right.
You got to follow her on Instagram. She has some great healthy recipes. And when we say healthy, people tend to be like, but they're good. They're good for adults. They're good for kids. And if you just fly through her Instagram, which is Fuel Well with Kristy, FUEL, and then well with Krissy, KRISSY. She has some great benefits. She has great ideas, benefits as in healthy benefits or healthy recipes. But as we wrap this up, it's like we've talked about so much, and I honestly could just talk to you for hours and break down these myths and all these kind of crazy stuff. But if somebody's feeling overwhelmed with trying to get to their health goals, I mean, what would you say as we wrap this up? Because now they've ingested all this information, and truly, Kristin, it's really not that hard. You just have to start.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't, there's so many things out there. I think that people just get overwhelmed.
Oh, completely. Like what now? Right. We've talked about what now. So, with a lot of my patients, sometimes in the first weeks or months of just working with me, I'll just ask them to just start focusing on eating more food as defined by Michael Pollan. And I love his definition. So he defined food as something that comes from nature, is fed from nature, and will eventually rot. So if we just say, you know what, 85% of my diet is going to be food, and that's all I'm going to do until I get to fall, and then I'm going to start making a lot more micro decisions, that's going to be beneficial, because that takes away the ultra processed foods. That makes us think before we eat something. So something that comes from nature, is fed from nature, and will eventually rot, opens up a world of things that typically we see consumed in areas of the world where people tend to live a lot longer and have a much longer health span.
Perfect advice. So just get going and get those goals. You got to go to KristinKirkpatrick.com. I'll put it all over my social media, and that's her website. And you can get so many great ideas, advice. Again, the recipes on Instagram and there as well. And then everywhere you look, she's got an article or she's on the national shows. So I'm so proud of you. You do such a great job. I like it when nutritionists and those who are very smart and know so much about this can break it down for people like us and me, just, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. Yeah. We hear all what's good, and, is it really that good?
Overload of information of nutrition is not always a good thing, right?
Yes, but today it was. So that was very good. Thank you so much for coming on. When you come to Cleveland, you better come find us.
Oh, no, of course.
I'll hunt you down.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Kristin. It was I love being on your show. So honored to be part of this. I think your show is amazing. Amazing. I was so excited when you announced that you were doing this. I was like, oh my gosh, you just have the most fun personality.
I love you.
Such a fun personality. So.
And that is my favorite part, I think, about being on TV. So this just expanded me doing interviews, and that's where it started. We have and you've been on our show so many times over the years. We have all these great guests that come in, but we're only 4 minutes long with Kristin Kirkpatrick, and then we got to do the news and the weather and everything else. And so this just allows everybody else across the country and the world, and podcasts are fantastic for that, to get to know, some great guests that come on, and there's so much more to it. And then we can talk longer about certain stuff.
I love it. So I love it.
You're great. All right. I will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.